Oh, okay. Hi. So let's see. We were talking about last time feedback loops, and we went through and talked about teacher and group feedback loops and teacher and individual feedback loops. And now we're going to do the other two, which I think are probably the least common, but maybe most effective, especially as kids get older with their peer groups. Those become really important. And then self reflection, we know through all the cognitive science coming out now how important self reflection is becoming more and more important. So, just talking about peer groups, it is a little bit more difficult to gain the data that we typically want with numbers and all that with peer groups, but it is still super important for that feedback loop for their peers, like using, Google documents, collaborative documents is super important for kids to be giving each other feedback. And then probably the other most useful one and powerful one, and one that I see most often, are Schoology discussions, or any discussions really, even in Seesaw, where kids can make comments or give each other feedback, and pretty structured feedback. The more structured it is, the more useful it is that they can actually use that feedback to make changes. Whatever you can use to do that is going to be super effective for kids, but it does take teaching them how to give feedback, which is a good discussion for us to start having as well. How do you really teach kids to give each other good feedback is one of those tough conversations. And I know there's a lot of others that I haven't added here. So just be thinking about what you use to give students the opportunity to get feedback from their peers. And then student to self feedback loop is becoming increasingly important. I use Portfolio with on Seesaw. I know many other people are trying Portfolios on Schoology this year, but any opportunities that you give students to reflect with themselves and to really take the time to sit down and think about what they did well or what they need more work on is the student to self feedback loop. So I mean, you can even use Kahoot for that if you're giving kids the opportunity to go back and really think, oh, hey, what do I really need to know? Or what problems were hard when we were doing this as a class for me? But it does take you being structured about that to give kids the opportunity to go back and really be thinking what they need to work on. So even pulling out a reflection notebook after Kahoot and say, hey, if we took this Kahoot again tomorrow, what would I make sure that I know or that I say differently? Write down 3 things I need to do different would be a good example of giving kids a student to self feedback loop. And maybe one that's a little bit less obvious than something like iReady scores, where they can hopefully be setting goals and trying to reach goals based on their particular scores, knowing what they need to get better at. All right, those were the second 2 feedback loops. Here's some extra resources if you need it.